welcome back everybody. Here we are for section 3, causes of environmental problems. So as we look at some of these principles that we want to follow in environmental science, let's identify quickly just what some of these problems are. Now this is 6 very broad-based environmental problems we're facing currently right now. Climate change. For the most part, we talk about that being global warming. However, we address it really as climate change. It might be warming here and cooling here a little bit. More rain there, less rain here. This aspect of global warming leads to climate change. Loss of species and habitats. As humans, we expand, we go into another area, we want to create an apartment complex, mall, shopping center, strip, etc. Well, we clear out the land of the trees of the habitat, and this also causes species problems. We see a lot of it in the rainforest, but it's also right here in our back door. Habitat loss, therefore habitat or species loss. Ocean acidification. Now, when we release molecules of things into the air like carbon dioxide, sulfur, nitrates, etc., common things from pollution, well, once those things interact with water, a chemical reaction occurs and acids form. Carbon dioxide forms carbonic acid. Yes, it's done this forever, but we're putting a lot more carbon dioxide in the air than we ever have, so we have more carbonic acid than we ever have. We burn coal, it releases sulfur in the air. Sulfur hits water, it turns into sulfuric acid, or the sulfur dissolves into the ocean, water turns into sulfuric acid. So, ocean acidification. There's diminishing access to fresh water. A lot more people on the planet, but the amount of fresh water hasn't really changed. Most of the water on the planet is obviously salt water. We can't drink or access. Then even of the fresh water, most of it is trapped in our poles, North Pole, South Pole, in ice or glaciers. What's available really to you and I in the streams, rivers, aquifers is not a lot. So a diminished access, more people, harder to get to it. And just resource waste, wasting of our resources, using up trees faster than they can grow back, using up aluminum faster than the earth can reproduce it, etc. Just plain simple waste. And also hazardous pollutants. A lot of our manufacturing processes use hazardous chemicals in the process of making whatever it is they're making. Sometimes it's an accident that these chemicals make their way into the environment. Other times it's kind of part of the process, if you will. Running a car releases things into the environment. Not that they're extremely hazardous, but you sort of get the idea. So these are some of the major problems that we are facing currently today. Well, let's look at some of the causes. Why are they here? Where do these problems come from? A large one is simply population growth. The human species has grown wildly in the last 100 years or so, but I'm going to run through these fairly quickly because the rest of this lecture is going to be breaking down and detailing these causes. So we have 5 of them. Population growth, unsustainable resource use, the omission of harmful environmental cost in market pricing of goods, kind of like that economics we talked about, full cost pricing is not going on. We have an increasing isolation from nature. People tend to not go out into the woods, out in nature, into the parks as often, which has some effects from it. And then we also have competing environmental worldviews. Not everybody sees the environment in the same way or thinks we should act or behave in the same way. So these are some of our major causes. Well, let's go in and kind of break these down. First, human population growth. We are in an exponential growth pattern of humans. It took thousands and thousands of years to us to reach the 1 billion part of humans. And then it still took hundreds of years to get to 2 billion, etc. Well, we're now on the point that we're hitting 1 billion people on the planet about every 50 years or so, or even less. Our current population at least as of 2018. I remember looking at it last year, and we are right on the cusp of 8 billion people on the planet. It's estimated by 2050 that we could be at 9.9. Once again, right at 10 billion people. 8 billion people today, in as little as 30 years, 9 billion people. Now, we don't know how many people the Earth can support indefinitely, but we know that currently our population is an issue or a problem, so the more people we get, it becomes more complicated. Hopefully some technologies can help fix some of it. I'm going to kind of throw the curve up back here, if you look. You know, we come all the way up to modern times. And we see when we get to, somewhere around 1800s, we hit our 1 billion. We had stayed fairly long, slow growth. There were some dips here and there because of famine, plague, you name it. But pretty long, slow growth until about the 800s, and 800s is where we kind of hit a peak. Now, Industrial Revolution comes along, medical revolution. We're keeping people alive longer. We're cutting down on the infant mortality rate. More kids are surviving into adulthood, etc. And we begin to sweep up. And you can see by this figure, it becomes a very steep curve. And this is a traditional curve that we see in populations once they are not threatened by other things. As long as they have enough space and enough food, and they're not threatened by another species, we will see an exponential growth, and this is currently where we are. Very high, rapid growth without something else happening. Eventually, the growth will get limited, either by the amount of food, amount of space, amount of water, something, and a population will have to level out. But it's one of the problems we're facing. Another one is simply affluence. In the United States, we are quite affluent. And I know, I hear you saying, we're not, my family doesn't have a lot. I understand what you're saying. But when I lived in Nepal, the average skilled worker, that's somebody like a carpenter, somebody who knows how to do things, earned about $1 a day. They earned enough money to buy food and make their basics happen. There wasn't a lot of extra. They didn't have extra pairs of shoes, lots of sets of clothes. They didn't have a car. They may have had a motorcycle for the whole family, if that was a pretty well-off family. Mainly they rode a bike, took the bus, etc. In America, we have a lot of affluence, as do most developed countries. And this tends to lead to an increase in our resource consumption. Since we have money, we tend to use it to go buy things that we may want or need. Ideally, we buy what we need and very little of what we want. The more affluent you are, you tend to consume more. It's just reality. This increases the environmental degradation. The more resources we use, we buy, we're having to take them from somewhere, and it also adds to pollution. The more I buy, the more trash I create, and that has to go somewhere. The old adage is, when you throw it away, where's away? You only have one planet. It's still here. So there are a lot of positive affluence. So better widespread education, for one. In the developed country, we educate everybody. You get to come to school. You get to learn from great teachers who have had a lot of years of college and experience in doing what we do. You get a good education. And this increases awareness of environmental issues and lots of things. So you can make good decisions, that you think about things. You don't just get duped into whatever somebody else says. You can think for yourself. And also, affluence provides us ability to have technologies. The time to develop and research technologies that have beneficial environmental impacts. For instance, when the environmental revolution came along, the industrial revolution came along, the smoke from smokestacks created a lot of pollution. Well, we developed scrubbers and precipitators to pull out most of the pollutants out of the smokestack. So today, we don't have near as much pollution out in the air as we did in the early 1900s. So the positive aspects of influence, technology that can actually benefit us, not just harm. Another one of these is this exclusion of harmful environmental health costs. Long, broad term to talk about that term, economics, full cost pricing. When I buy a gallon of gasoline in America, I am only paying for what it took the company to pull it out of the ground, refine it, transport it to the gas place so I can pull it out, put it in my car, my tank. And also the government helps subsidize some of that. They help pay for some of that cost, make it artificially a little bit cheaper. This stimulates the economy. The people go, ooh, I can go out, I can go places, etc. So the government actually covers a bit of that price for us. Well, there's no counting for the environmental effects of it, the pollutants that wind up going into the air, the harmful effects of it. So we're really buying gas at cheaper than it really costs, especially if we want to put in environmental safeguards. Kind of like we've done with tobacco. You buy a pack of cigarettes and the cost is increased because taxes go to the medical realm where we know people that smoke are going to wind up going. So the research to help offset the problems. We need to do something like that with more of our environmental cost of goods. Well, goods and services that do not include this, well, it winds up making you and I really lack information. Say, oh, well, that's really cheap. I'll just get it. It may not be as cheap as you think. A piece of plastic, we buy it, we throw it away. Well, it stays in the environment for hundreds, if not thousands of years. We don't know how long plastic lasts. So we just think it's cheap and disposable. No, it's not as disposable as we think it is. So maybe there needs to be a cost on it to help us think about that, make a realization of the actual cost of this service or good. Companies receive tax breaks and subsidies, kind of like I mentioned with gasoline. These subsidies encourage the depletion. Once again, it's in my best interest. The government's giving me a little bit of money to produce this good, so I'm going to produce as much of it as I can. So it's subsidized, so you and I don't really see the real cost. We're buying it at a minimized cost when it really costs this. And if we add an environmental factor into it, it might be more here. So when we don't count the true cost of some of these goods, it winds up hurting the planet. Another one is actually isolation from nature. For hundreds of thousands of years, we were hunter-gatherers. We were at one with nature, if you will. We were in it all the time, completely dependent on nature for our food, for virtually everything we had. Sure, we'd go into our house, our home, our teepee, or whatever kind of shelter we had, but by and large, we were out in nature all the time. When we had to eat, we had to kill something. We knew what it was. It wasn't some sanitized plastic wrap frozen chicken nugget that I don't really think of where it comes from. We had to kill the chicken. There's more of a reality with it. So this lack of contact with nature tends to have an effect on us. It's being determined, or it's being discussed as being nature deficit disorder. Now, this is not recognized yet on the DMV-5 or DSMV, the DSM-5, any of the journals which try and label certain diseases or conditions like FreePD, but it is something that really appears. Let's talk about the benefit of outdoor activities. You go outside, you go out there, you take a walk, you go play out in the field, you go kayaking down the river, go to the beach, walk along the ocean, any of these type of things that are getting you outside in nature. Well, here are some of the definitive benefits of doing that. Overall, better health. You're outside, breathing nice fresh air, you're exercising, running around, out and about, seeing the things. Our people that do this, their health tends to be better. There's reduced stress. There is definitely a correlation with going outside, being in nature, and your stress levels coming down. Many of us spend our days inside almost all the time. You're at home, get up, shower, shave, have your breakfast, come to school, you're at school, you go home from school, back to your house, at your computer, playing on the PlayStation, etc. and you rarely go outside of short jumps to get from here to the car or car to inside. But those who are outside more have reduced stress, tend to have improved mental capacities. Einstein was famous for wanting to go for a walk before making a big decision. Want to go out and think about it, let things settle in before making a decision. So this improved mental capabilities is something that is associated with being outside more often. There's an increase in imagination and creativity. I'll quite often go for a bike ride as I mull over something to do for either one of these lectures or one of my other kind of videos. It just kind of helps get those creative juices going, and just a better sense of connection with the earth. When we're out in it more and you think about that they're destroying some of these environments, yeah, but I go there, I'm out in it, I don't want that to happen. But anyway, this benefits of outdoors. So if there are these benefits, well, if you're not outside, you're obviously not getting those benefits, which leads to this term nature deficit disorder. Also, we have different environmental worldviews. Not everybody sees the environment in the same way. Some think it's there for us, some think it is there for us to manage, take care of, and some of us think that we're only a part of it and it's not really ours, we're just part of it. These are different ways of viewing the exact same world that we all live in. And we need to talk about environmental ethics. And we just have some ethical questions. Ethics just comes down to what's right. Right versus wrong. Should I or shouldn't I? This is the topic of ethics. So why should we care about the environment? This is one good ethical question. Why should we care? Do we have an obligation to protect other species against extinction, especially that have been caused by human actions? Or should every person be entitled to equal protection from environmental hazards? Or do we sacrifice some people for others? Some ethical questions we have to have. It comes down to this worldview. There are, once again, very broadly speaking, three broad worldviews about the environment. One is human-centered. And under human-centered, we're going to kind of break it down into two. There's the planetary management worldview, that humans are here to manage the environment. The world is really here for us. We're the top dog species, and we need to kind of manage to make sure that the world is here to benefit us in the best way possible. So we need to protect it, exploit it, manipulate it in whatever way that best fits humans. Another one is a stewardship worldview. This one says we are stewards of the environment. It's here and we need to do what we can as a species cognizant about it, that we can do things, and we need to be stewards of it. Take care of it in the best way possible. These are human-centered kind of two views of it. Are we supposed to manage it, or are we supposed to be stewards of it, kind of protectors, if you will? Then there's a life-centered environmental worldview. Life-centered is that all species have value. So we need to look at the world in that way. Everything out there. The koala bear has value. The paramecium has value. The worm has value. The caterpillar has value. Humans have value. We all have a value together, and we need to have the world protected for it. And lastly, there's the earth-centered worldview. And this is that the natural capital exists for all species, not just humans. So somebody with an earth-centered worldview says, hey, we're just part of it. It is not ours for the taking. It's not ours to manipulate or manage. But this is here for everybody. So we need to make sure that we protect it for all species and all things, not just us. Well, that will wrap it up for section 3. Take care, guys. Get out there in nature. Go for a walk. Do something between your homework from time to time. Get outside, even if it's walking around your backyard or your apartment complex. Do something. Otherwise, take care, guys, and we'll see you next time.